Then we are going to solve some radical equations that simplify to a linear equation with one radical sign. When I'm trying to simplify something with a radical sign, I first want to make sure that that radical sign is by itself. So if there's anything next to it, if it's a plus 5 way on the end or times 2, I need to get rid of that first. Once the radical is by itself, like on this first problem, I'm going to get rid of the square root by doing the opposite. What's the opposite of a square root?
Not a square root?
Not a square root. Oh, you're right, it's not a square root. What do you think the opposite of taking the square root of something is? It is squaring something. If I have this, if I have the square root of 3 and I square it, that means I'm going to have the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, right? Because squaring means times itself. Square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which is now a perfect square, and the square root of 9 just gives me 3. So when you square a square root, it undoes it because they're inverse operations, and you just get what's underneath the radical sign. So that's what we're going to do to solve something with a radical. If I have the square root of w minus 11 equals 5, what I'm going to do is square both sides of my equation. Because if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side. When I square the square root, it's going to eliminate that and just give me the w minus 11 that's underneath there. The other side didn't have a square root. I have to square that. 5 squared?
25.
25. In order to solve that, what would I do?
Add the 11.
Add the 11. So w is going to equal 36. Now, when you're working with radical expressions, sometimes you get what's called an extraneous solution. You worked it out correctly, but when you check it, it doesn't check. So you always want to make sure you go back and check your answers to make sure that they work out properly. So I'm going to check my answer by putting 36 in here and saying, okay, 36 minus 11 is 25. The square root of 25 is 5. Yep, that one checks out. That's going to be a good answer. So number 14, if you look at that one, I'm solving it for you, but notice on this one, the square root part isn't by itself. So before I square both sides, I need to move my number over to the other side. Because otherwise, if I tried to square this, I would have to FOIL that out, and I'd have a great big huge mess, and it wouldn't be very fun. Well, it might be fun for me. So I'm going to go ahead and move my 2 to the other side first. So since it's a minus 2, I have to add my 2 and make this problem the square root of u minus 6 equals 7. Now it looks like that previous one. So what do I do with that?
And divide the exponent of 2?
I'm going to square both sides. Yep.
Yeah, square both sides.
Square both sides. And if I square both sides, which am I going to get?
U minus 6 equals 49.
U minus 6 equals 49. And Kenyon, if I want to solve that, what would I do? Add 6 to 49, exactly. Wasn't a trick question. U then is going to equal 55. Again, I want to check that to make sure that's a good solution. So I would say, okay, 55 minus 6 is 49. The square root of 49 is 7. 7 minus 2 is 5. Yep, that's what I had over there. So that is a good solution. Number 15 then, if I want to solve for u, what should be my first step?
First you have to minus the 14.
First I have to minus the 14. So I would have the square root of u plus 20 equals negative 13. Then what would I do with that?
Square both sides.
I would square both sides. And if I square both sides, what am I going to get?
U plus 24. Negative 169?
Now when you take a negative 13 times a negative 13, you get a
Positive.
positive 169. And then to solve that,
Minus the 20.
minus the 20. So U is going to equal
149.
149. Now if I check that one, what happens here? If I put my 149 in there, 149 plus 20 is
160.
169. The square root of 169 is
13,
13. 13 plus 14 is
27.
27. Does that equal 1? No. This is one of those where you have that extraneous solution because you squared this negative and it made it positive, and therefore it doesn't check. So watch for that, or make sure you're checking your answers. All right. Those are the next 5 things on your pipe chart. Questions on any of those? You're ready to go then.